Welcome to Go Guild. Lots of very exciting announcements this time around as well. It's been a busy month in the Go space. So yeah, let's get into it. As usual, announcements and news. We've got a knowledge share. Announcement and news. Colleagues David and Matthew, I'm sure they're on the call. We had the pleasure to go to GoForCon UK this year. It was really good. Some of the best talks that I've seen. There's one, surprisingly enough, the YouTube videos are already out for the UK. They're usually like 6 months delayed. Now it's on, so really good. One from Matt Pratt at Google. He was looking at the Pigo stuff. Really interesting stuff to see. And some stuff on Go channels. But to be honest, the quality of the talks are all really good. And it was, yeah, fantastic. 123 is released. I'm sure you've all seen. There's lots of features in there. Well, one major feature that's causing some controversy, but that's out now. I think that was maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. So you can get that now. One of the big ones in 123 is telemetry. Telemetry is basically making the Go team so that they can collect usage data and statistics so that they can help sort of understand how Go is working, etc. Luckily, this is opt-in, which is great to see from the language. If it was the other way around, it might raise a few more eyebrows, but there we go. Like I was saying before, so this is one of the major changes to the language, which is the range over func. I spoke about it last month. Basically allows us to define our own iterators in for loops. Yeah, Fibonacci kind of vibe there is on the right. I would love to see some kind of like real world examples on this. I think I saw on Twitter the other day someone using it in like an SQL query loop. So you'd have like a query as a struct, your SQL database as a struct, and then you're looping over records, which is really cool. I can't think of any like real world examples, but certainly it's a good feature, very functional nonetheless. This is something that I discovered and it was hidden underneath the Go release notes, is the unique package. This is a new package. It's used for testing the equality of two types that are the same. Why? It's a lot faster. So we can do unique.make and we can compare two types. You can see the benchmarks down there. For strings and ints, I don't think it, for something that's small, I don't think it would be such a big difference, but certainly for some large data types, that might be an interesting benchmark to run, to have those there. In community news, Mr. Russ Cox is passing torches over. He's been part of the Go team for a very long time. His website is amazing. I wish more websites were like this these days. It's HTML5, just classic. Better scores really high on page speed insights. But no, he's had a really big impact on the Go community, and I'm sure he'll be missed. I think he's working on like a bot or something to help manage the Go issues on their repo. I've forgotten what it's called, but that's something to look out for. So the index, controversial to say the least, but we'll be happy to know that Go goes up to 7th place. It's entering the top 10 for the first time. Some JavaScript devs might be screaming at us, but this is good for us. So yeah, really good on that one. This is a really interesting one. So on GitHub, someone a lot more clever than I am discovered via assembly, and you can look at it in the GitHub issues there, that using new and then T as opposed to initialization inline actually has lower inline cost. So that's, yeah, a little tidbit there. So again, very small. You're not going to see any RAM improvements or anything, but again, quite a nice little tip there. A package that I discovered on my quest for this talk is time diff. Really nice little small package for printing human readable time diffs. I know that Go time formatting sometimes is a bit strange, so this is a really good package just to debug or to have human readable output or send human readable output to the front end. Very small as well, so it's quite quick. So on to the main event. Melky, thank you very much for joining us. A little intro on Melky. He's worked at Twitch, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you've worked at Twitch for 3 years, starting off as an ML infra engineer. Yep. And you started off as a Ruby engineer, right?
Yeah, Twitch was primarily made in Ruby. I was on the tail end of the transition between Ruby and Go, so not too extensive in the Ruby side, but mostly on the Go side.
Oh, fantastic! No, that's good. Well, really good. Glad to have you on, buddy. And I'll
thank you.
Have the baton over to you.
All right, cool. Let me see if I can present. I'll share now. Let's go here. Can everyone hear me correctly? Can everyone see?
Yeah, you're all good. We can see your screen as well, buddy.
Cool. Yeah. So thanks. Hi everyone. This is an awesome chance to get to talk. I really think it's a cool chance just to kind of talk about things. I made this quick talk called Building Open Source Go Projects in Public. I'm going to quickly go through, who I am, building using Go, building open source projects, building in public, and putting it all together with kind of the crux of this project that I built in public called Go Blueprint. It's kind of like if anyone's familiar with front end, it's kind of like a Create React app, CLI boilerplate. You can it just binds to your binary, and then you can execute it, and it like gives you prompts to build out a Go project starter kind of structure. It's relatively easy. I'm extremely proud that it's at 3.4K stars. I think that's really, really cool, and it's really community driven. I think that's the cooler part than any amount of stars. But let's just kind of go through the motions. So I'm using Excalibur for this presentation. Yeah, so who am I? So I work at Twitch as a machine learning infrastructure engineer. I've been at Twitch for 3 years come September. So in the tech world, especially here in the US, that's like a lifetime, 3 years. Like people typically jump after 1 year. So 3 years, I think it's really awesome. I previously worked at a startup that was acquired. And a little cool tidbit is I went to school for mechanical engineering. I didn't like it. And so I think like a lot of people now, I just learned how to code. And the way I got into kind of the content space, unquote, is to keep myself accountable. I started to stream myself coding on Twitch because I couldn't find time. Or if I would dedicate time to streaming, I'd be like, yeah, I'll put 2 hours in. But really those 2 hours would be like an hour and a half of watching YouTube and then maybe half an hour of like trying to tinker around. So I was like, okay, if people are watching, expecting me to write code, I can't really escape it. So yeah, I stream primarily on Twitch in the programming category, which I didn't know existed until I started doing it. So if you're interested, I recommend checking that out. And then, yeah, I just kept coding, learning on Twitch. I made a YouTube channel. And on this YouTube channel, I think is what allowed me to have an opportunity like this to talk with other fellow Go developers is I made a lot of content around Go, and I continue to make a lot of content around Go because it's a primary language that I learned at Twitch. And kind of moving from all that, I was able to make a course for Front-End Masters where I talk a little bit about Go and AWS. And then I'm currently making another course for Go. So all of that is to say that I try to be really involved into the Go ecosystem. I think Go is a phenomenal language. I really, really enjoy using it. So I try my best to keep up with different updates and how to use it. So brings me to how I built using Go. So I literally had zero experience with Go until I started at Twitch. I got hired and they said, okay, cool. You're going to use Go here. And after working at Twitch and talking to a lot of different engineers, I now realize that Twitch is one of the very few companies where Go is like the primary language. Like, it's not like we have like microservices that are written Go that handle one particular job. It's like 95% of the code base, especially in the backend side, is written in Go. And you don't really see that all too often. And like Ainsley said, Twitch was actually a company that was primarily focused on Ruby, and it was written all in Ruby. And then I think in 2017, they made the migration to Go. It was a crazy migration. It took a lot of effort, obviously, as everyone can imagine. If you've ever done any sort of migration work, whether it be, you know, back-end services, front-end frameworks, or even database migrations, God forbid, it's a pain in the ass. So migrating all of Twitch to a new programming language was quite the task, right? And then obviously having this opportunity made me realize how great Go is to use, because I was hired as a junior engineer, you know, eyes bigger than what I had to do. And they said, okay, use Go to do your task. And I instantly got hit with the imposter syndrome and think, okay, well, they're going to fire me in about 3 weeks. I don't know a lick of Go, let alone having to already be cut Jira tickets. But then obviously I realized, hey, it's actually not that bad. And this is a question I always get is, you know, how can I use Go for machine learning? Because I work in that space. And I want to make a clear distinction. We're not using Go for like training or creating models. That is still primarily Python. Python is the go-to for that space. But we are using Go for all the infra, getting the inferences, and quite literally everything around the model creation. So how can we use that model in production? How can we scale it? How can we make sure it's reliable, available, and et cetera, et cetera. So Go is our primary focus on supporting our machine learning models. So like all of us, I can assume I quickly fell in love with Go because of how fast I was able to build, which leads me to building open source Go projects. This is my GitHub repository. I don't think it's anything too crazy, to be honest. There's so many great open source libraries. I listed some of them that I really like here. There's NeoVim, Chi, Docker, Gorilla, GoAuth, and a lot more. I think open source has a lot of key benefits. Obviously, there's enhanced collaboration, there's increased transparency, and there's the ability to actually make yourself a better developer, which I can talk to in a bit more. But for me, I actually was hesitant going into open source, which is kind of funny because I would stream myself live and people could see what I'm coding in real time. So if anybody wanted to steal something, they could just quickly do this. But I was like, oh, I don't want to show my code in open source. Like, people are going to take it. Like, I had all these pretenses. But then you realize people are really lazy and people don't care that much about you or your code. And that's kind of the reality of it. If anybody wants to steal your code, like, they're gonna have to go quite, you know, it's quite to go into your profile, look what you need, take it, and then what are they gonna do with it, right? So I'm always in the idea that, like, idea is 1%, execution is 99. So go ahead, make your project open source if it's not like a pay barrier or something completely novel. And there's a really cool individual by the name of TJ. He actually created, or is a core maintainer of NeoVim, which is an IDE. I highly recommend and everyone to check it out. I used NeoVim for about 4 years. I still kind of use it here and there, so quick little shout out there. But there's a key distinction that I would like to make, and is that building open source doesn't equate to building in public. They're two completely different things. You can go into your lair, wherever that is, into, you know, the laboratory, build, and then deploy it and make it available on GitHub or whatever, and it's open source, but it's not building in public. You're still kind of doing this in the shadows and then showing the end result to whoever's interested. So building in public is kind of this newer concept, I guess, that's primarily happening on Twitch and like YouTube Live. And as you can kind of infer, building in public is like a real-time feedback loop. Whereas building open source projects, you go ahead, you tinker, you do something that no one really knows what you're doing, and then you kind of commit and deploy your changes, and then you get feedback. Whereas when you build in public, you get real-time input like the second you do something, right? So it's kind of like, if anyone's read like a DDIA book, it's kind of like a batch system versus a streaming process system, right? Batch, it works, you get feedback, but that's very on like a set cadence. Streaming, it's like the inputs and outputs never end while you are streaming or while you're building in public. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like on Twitch or on YouTube. You can build in public on Twitter or wherever there is this allowance of a real-time feedback loop. And to kind of demonstrate the, I guess, impact from my perspective, really, is when you are building a project, whether it is like a side project or a side hustle or something that you want to take off, this is kind of the channel, and it's very dumbed down, but this is what happens when you don't build in public. You have this idea, you buy a domain, you build it, you launch it, you get feedback. All right. You kind of go through this process, and then sometimes you'd be lucky if you even launch, because I think a lot of people, myself included, we buy domains. We're like, oh, I'm going to get to this project, but I just to wrap up these couple of projects, or after my vacation, like it's going to be so cool. And then you start it and you're like, I don't know. I don't think I want to do this anymore, but I have this other idea. And you go through like this domain iterative idea spill. And if you can get to a launch part, it's great. However, what I didn't kind of reflect here is the time it gets to launch, it takes quite a bit. I don't know about, anyone here. For me, if I want to build something and launch it, it takes me, I could easily say about maybe a month, if not more, depending on the scale of the project, right? And so, if I launch it and let's say the feedback is just everybody hates it. This is the worst idea ever. Like, I'm a complete idiot. Like, I essentially could have wasted a month or if not more of my time. And this is what a lot of people do. They kind of go through this, they deploy it on Product Hunt, Hacker News, Twitter, and then they launch it. They're super excited, buy the champagne bottle to pop it, but the feedback's not so great. They're disgruntled, they're sad, and then that's that. Then they have to go to the gym to get some therapy. But then, how I like to look at it is like you have this channel or availability for building in public, and this is what this green aspect does, right? So let's say you have this idea, you go ahead and build it, and while you're building it, you have this like instant feedback cycle on your idea, or even on how you're executing the idea. Because I'm going to use streaming as the vessel here of building in public. There's going to be people in chat. Sometimes there's a lot, sometimes there isn't. But typically there are people who care in chat, and they will provide you feedback of the idea, or at the very least, they're going to ask you what your idea is. And that like elevator pitch is such a untrained muscle, because if someone asks you, okay, what's your project? And you've never explained your project to anyone, but it's always been kept inside your brain, you start to realize like, wait, how do I explain this to someone that isn't my brain? And the first time you do it, you're going to butcher. You'll be like, that's not actually what the project is. Like, okay, I could have done this better. Then you do it another time and another time. And you start to build this like really efficient way to explain what your project is in 30 seconds. And you will see if people think it's a good idea, or people like, I think that's bad. Why do you do this? Or they'll show you like an idea that already exists that's better. And then you have this, instant feedback. It's like, okay, wait, I didn't know my idea already existed. Let me tinker, let me change, let me edit this up, let me make it more obvious, right? And so with this kind of added feedback channel, you're then able to iteratively build your project, launch it, go through that feedback cycle, and then you have this new sort of loop, so to speak. And I think it's incredibly important to have feedback if you do launch something. Which takes us to kind of Go Blueprint, what I kind of started at the beginning of the talk. And the way I like to think about it is Go Blueprint is like this combination between building open source and building in public. And I don't want to like say that Go Blueprint is just like, crazy project or anything like that. It's just something I'm proud of. If I'm being honest, it's just something I'm